All right. Welcome, everyone, to the Windows 11 Security Team Ask Me Anything edition. Really pumped to be with you all today. I hope you have some awesome Windows 11 security questions. I see a lot of them online, so I'm hoping we will answer those today. And there's no better crew than to answer those than the awesome members of the Windows security team. So I want to run through who we have today on our panel. We have Steve, who can answer just about anything authentication related you can think of in Windows. We have Kirsten, who can answer any number of things, Samreen, and Jordan. So welcome. Start to bring your questions in and we'll answer them. We already have the first one. And unsurprisingly, it's about our cool new feature called personal data encryption. So it's from Seth. So for personal data encryption that's tied to the user's Windows Hello identity, are there provisions for enabling admin staff to access the data? Kirsten, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually don't know the answer to that, but we can take that feedback and we can find out for you and answer in the tech community.
Well, there you go. It's so new. We don't have the answer
getting
yet.
The admins access to that is great.
Cool. All right, we have the second question already. They're coming in. Question from Eli. We've all seen how easy we can move from Win 10 to Win 11, but how easy can we migrate from another brand of antivirus, anti-malware to Windows Defender? I'll take that since I used to work in Windows Defender. It's actually very, very simple. Depending on what configurations or other things you have set up, if you just have a very vanilla Defender setup, I think it's as simple as removing your old antivirus and letting Defender kick in by default. We have a Security Center API that sort of detects what the primary antivirus is and allow you to do that. If you've got some configuration settings on the back end, let's use doing things that are more on an enterprise commercial level, you have specific tie-ins to a SIM or something like that. It's a bit more complicated. You'll have to do the mapping and migration of one settings to another. The good news is our Microsoft Defender for Endpoint team, as well as our MDM team, are complete experts in this. They have some good documentation and some walkthroughs on how to do that migration. And I'll work with the team to get some links to that later in the show. All right. We're gonna do some technical stuff here. Question from Anderson. Could an SMM isolation policy event prevent a rootkit within SMM from modifying winlogon.exe process from memory? What about Edge or only kernel memory? So today, depending on the implementation, we have in Secure Core PCs, we have an SMM isolation layer that will prevent you from modifying hypervisor and some regions of OS memory. There's an aperture into the operating system, and that slightly depends on how the firmware is implemented by the OEM, which in general will prevent you from modifying any OS-related memory and keep you constrained to NVRAM. So the answer is most likely not, but that would be a little more OEM dependent. But what we can say is the hypervisor and the kernel, which are the most important components, cannot be modified there.
Hey, Dave, can you answer what is SMM?
Sure. SMM is system management mode. I would go as far as to say it's the most privileged piece of software / firmware anywhere on the operating system. If you're super geeky and remember the whole operating system rings concept, right? Ring 0 to ring 3. We often refer to SMM as ring -1 or -2, depending on if you have a hypervisor or not. So if that's all gibberish to you, what it really means is that's the scariest piece of software on the system. If it gets modified, you're in big trouble. And we've done a bunch of work to try and isolate compromises of SMM. That said, the best way to protect SMM is to not have bugs. So that's your best bet. All right, let's see. What else do we have? And panel, feel free to chime in here. Will Windows 10 get the newly announced security features for Windows 11, such as smart app control, personal data encryption, etc.? Who wants to jump in there?
I saw Jordan unmute.
Happy to jump in. So I can speak for smart app control. Smart app control is limited to Windows 11. Smart App Control does run on a feature called WDAC, or Windows Application Control. Application Control essentially allows a user or an IT admin to specify a policy for what apps and essentially all code that runs on the system, both in kernel mode and user mode. So while Smart App Control isn't necessarily available on Windows 10, you can make use of the great app control features as far back as Windows 10. So WDAC, or Application Control, is available on Windows 10 and above. There are no hardware or SKU limitations. And it also ties into Defender Cloud Reputation or AI in the cloud.
And just to jump in there, I would say the vast majority of the security features we're talking about in Windows 11 can be also implemented in Windows 10, sometimes in a different way. A lot of our goal with Windows 11 is to make this easier, better, faster, and on by default. Does that mean you can't be super ultra secure on Win 10? No way. In fact, I have some Win 10 machines myself that I've configured, but we're making it easier in 11, and that's a good way to think about it. All right, crew, are you ready for some more questions? All right. So question from Adam. I would like to learn more about how and where Windows stores the password for this feature. Is it in Windows Pluton? And how does password management work? How does it work with password management tools and using a clipboard to paste passwords? I'm going to pass this one to Steve, who can just answer in general. He actually has got some great blog posts about how password work. I think the way I would interpret this is, can you talk about a little bit about how passwords work, and then maybe how the TPM and or Pluton works in there, Steve? I think that would be a good way to answer that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think perhaps this is talking about the password detection feature when if you're using your password and an app pops up and is requesting it. I think that's how I'm interpreting this.
Let's go with that.
All right. So let's start there. So the first important thing to understand is, how do passwords work in Windows in general? We try very hard to keep passwords very short-lived in Windows, so that in the event that the machine does get compromised, it's not available in memory. We haven't persisted it to disk or in any usable form, and things of that nature. The general process for how passwords get used usually starts with your logon screen. You log in, you type your password in, and that gets passed into our security subsystem, which uses that as a basis for the rest of the security of your system. So if you are doing data protection, or if you are using Active Directory or Azure Active Directory for your logon authority, we do some authentication, get rid of the password as quickly as possible, and then get you to the desktop. In the password leak detection feature, the way that works is we basically take a copy of your password, we hash it tens of thousands of times in a specific format, so it's not reversible. If you happen to get a copy of your memory, it's not available. You can't do anything with it. And what happens is, we will periodically pull all the different things that you've typed into your keyboard. So, I'm in a browser, or I've opened up Notepad, or I've opened up Outlook or whatever, and suddenly someone asks me for my password, and I type in p@ss whatever. We detect the keyboard strokes, and we say, hey, wait a second, this value that you just typed in matches this incredibly complex hash of your password. Maybe you shouldn't have done that. And we signal to the rest of the system, hey, we've just alerted that this password is being typed in somewhere where it shouldn't be. And we go and we alert you. We pop the prompt saying, did you mean to do this? And in some ways, we also detect, no, this is actually a real logon form. We did this, this is important. This is normal. We expect that. We have some heuristics around there to detect, is this something that we care about, or is this an expected scenario? Like when you're logging into Windows, for example, you hit Windows L or Control-Alt-Delete to lock and then unlock. We detect those sorts of things and effectively ignore them. specifically with how passwords work with TPM and Pluton, in a lot of cases, they actually don't. These actual passwords in Windows predate Pluton and TPMs. And so over time, this is one of the reasons why we're developing our passwordless story. How do we get rid of passwords? Because we cannot benefit from the technologies like Pluton, like TPM, like VBS for things like Credential Guard, and we can't really secure passwords like we can with better credentials like Windows Hello and FIDO and things of that nature.
Thanks, Steve, for that detailed answer. So I wanted to pause for a second, even though there's awesome questions rolling in, and maybe get to know our panel a little bit more. I think you can get from what Steve is talking about. He knows a little bit about passwords, just a little bit. So Steve, do you want to tell kind of our audience what you work on a day-to-day basis, and then tell me what is your most anticipated or feature that you're most excited about for Win 11?
Okay, so I work on the authentication platform team within the crypto identity and authentication org. I find great amusement in that org name, just because when you get it down to the acronym, it's fantastic. I won't share it here. You have to figure it out yourself. So that means that on a day-to-day basis, I spend about half my time in email and the other half in, code editor, writing code for all of the new authentication stuff. For instance, Credential Guard is one, all of the Active Directory authentication processes, things of that nature. Some of the things that we have coming up, which is what I'm really excited about, is we are devoting a ton of time to deprecation of legacy protocols like NTLM. We're spending a lot of time and energy on how do we get rid of that from the system. And for what's coming up in Windows 11, there's some pretty cool technologies that we're starting to light up by default, Credential Guard being a primary one. It's a very powerful technology that does a really good job of protecting your passwords, protecting your identity within enterprise networks, and does a really good job of mitigating attacks, pass the hash, silver ticket attacks, things like that. And we're turning that on by default. Another one that we're turning on by default is protected processes or protected process mode for LSA, which is a mechanism that prevents you from attacking LSA directly by doing hacks that involve debugger processes, memory dumps, things of that nature. It makes it a really pain in the neck to start attacking some of the critical Windows processes.
Awesome. All right, we're going to get back to questions, but before we do, I'm going to introduce at least one other person on the same team as you. Samreen, do you want to talk a little bit about what you do and also what your favorite Windows 11 feature is?
Yes, absolutely. So I also work in the CIA team that Steve was describing earlier, except I work specifically within cryptography. So that's thinking about how we can make sure we're implementing features across our applications that are cryptographically secure, but also thinking about how, as the industry is shifting more towards kind of the post-quantum space, how we can bring those new features back into our applications in the best way to make that accessible for all of you guys. I would say my favorite Windows 11 security feature is probably Windows Hello, and that strive towards just making logging into your devices as seamless as possible. I love just being able to walk up to my computer and it detects me and just unlocks. It makes my day easier, and I hope it does the same for all of you.
Very cool. So we're going to get to Jordan and Kirsten in a minute, but we're going to start taking some questions because they are piling up. All right. So question from Quintin, I think is how you say it, for certain scenarios, an end user needs local admin rights to run a specific program. Is there a possibility to give it to only that specific application instead of the entirety of Windows? Steve, do you want to answer that?
Sure. So this turns out to be a very difficult problem, not specifically just in Windows, but in security systems in general. So the short answer is you actually can't, or certainly not very easily. And the reason for that has to do with how security systems isolate different processes from one another. And basically what it boils down to is this problem that when you're logged into a certain machine, you have this logon session, and this logon session has your identity information. That identity information has your group memberships, your local privileges. So am I allowed to run as administrator? Am I allowed to execute certain things that modify the system, things of that nature? And any process that runs in that logon session has those privileges, and there is no isolation between different processes running within that same logon session. This is where UAC came into play, where we actually start creating effectively two different logon sessions. So you have your logon session, which is your low privilege. So when I'm running Outlook, or I'm running a web browser, I'm running in a much lower privilege session. Whereas when I right-click Run as Administrator, that ends up getting launched into a different logon session. And so you have these different silos of privileges. So there's a difficulty in keeping those different things isolated while also sharing the same session information, like who the current user is, being able to share things to the desktop, clipboard, for example. That one ends up being how do we transfer things from a low privilege clipboard into a higher privileged application? That ends up being some very tricky things. However, we are definitely improving this story. One of the things that we're working towards is this idea that you can have just-in-time privilege elevation, sort of a UAC v3 model where you can elevate to a higher privilege, run whatever you need to run, and then go back to your standard user process. That just went into preview recently, I believe. Is that right, Dave?
I think so, yes. Very cool. All right. So switching up from authentication, a lot of questions coming in on authentication. Glad to have Steve here to help with that. We're going to switch to an interesting question I think Jordan would be best positioned to answer. With more and more defenses being employed to prevent local code running with elevated privileges from doing bad things, does the standard user to admin security boundary still matter? Jordan, what's your take here?
That's an excellent one. That's a tough one. Absolutely, it does. So I work a lot with enterprises who are on their journey of application control, and a lot of the feedback that we get back from our enterprises is, hey, our users run as local admin. What are the protections we can put in place? So there's absolutely there's importance around that security boundary. Our guidance is always kind of similar to a zero trust model, but it's to limit the scope of what your users can run by default. So we absolutely recommend that managed devices, they run as local user when possible. But we always continue to stratify and protect that security boundary. So a good example of this is our our newer vulnerable drivers block list program that the Microsoft Defender and folks on this call in enterprise and security co-manage. So a lot of the drivers that we're blocking with the same technology that ultimately Smart App Control uses to defend. A lot of the driver vulnerabilities that we're blocking allow elevation of privilege into the kernel. So this is absolutely something that we're continuing to invest in. We work closely with the driver publishers and developers to not only remediate and kind of coach them on their journey of how to write secure code for a kernel, but also kind of hold their feet to the fire in the sense that they need to first fix the driver, roll that out to users, patch that driver, and we need to block it in the kernel. So we absolutely continue to maintain that security boundary. Great
Very
question.
cool. And then Jordan, I actually saw a question on Twitter last night that I would love to throw your way as well on this topic, which is how is the driver block list feature in Windows 11, which generated a large amount of interest, how is that updated?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a couple facets to that block list. So the first is Defender has EDR detections in place that enterprises can opt into. The second is Defender ASR attack surface reduction rules that, again, enterprises can opt into and protect against. And then the third is the kernel block list that Dave is alluding to. You can turn on that feature in a couple of different ways. My favorite way to turn it on is in the Windows security app. So that's pretty cool there. But the way we actually update it is we have a virtual team of people spanning, across our security teams, enterprise and security, Defender for endpoint folks, MSRC. And we work closely to triage and investigate drivers that come into us, get reported by our security researchers. So we're very reliant on our security researchers and super appreciative of everything they do and the drivers that they send to us. But so once a driver gets reported to us, we reverse that driver. So we have some pretty smart people here. We reverse that driver. We have static analysis tools, and we figure out what that driver is doing. And all while we're doing this, we're working closely with the driver publishers, right? We're helping them understand, the issue at hand here, what the severity of the situation is. Most times, driver publishers are aware of the vulnerability, and they're already on the path, or they already have patched the driver. So that makes our lives much easier. So we can actually just roll out a block because there's vNext driver in the pipeline.
So we have one more question. This is a pretty technical question, so I'll throw this out there. Another question about AAD kerberos. How does Cloud AP know which tenant ID proxy to choose?
Oh, that's actually a really easy answer. When you type in your password or you use Windows Hello or your FIDO key, a request is made to Azure Active Directory, and you're authenticated, your group membership and different things are sort of pulled in, and a token is created. With that token, you also have additional metadata, things like what is your identity? What is your name? What is your account name? What is your on-premises information? And other things like, what is your tenant ID? And all of that gets bundled up, returned to the caller, and that gets handed to the rest of the system saying, hey, here's this information. Here's your tenant ID. Here's your on-premises domain information. And that gets handed to the Kerberos stack, as well as the Cloud TGT ticket granting ticket. And Kerberos stack looks at that and says, oh, I understand what this is. I know that I need to do the Kerberos proxy protocol. I'm going to build all of this information together. I know that the logon authority is AAD, so that means that the endpoint is login.windows.online. Microsoftonline.com / whatever the tenant ID is / Kerberos. And it just goes from there.
Awesome. Thanks for that answer. All right. We have another one. With the new Pluton integrated into Silicon that's coming to market, I was wondering about how the technology was integrated with the CPU. And did you have to develop a new way for Pluton to talk to the CPU? Basically, the concept of Pluton is to integrate what we call the root of trust or security processor onto the CPU package or die. And that's going to be very architectural dependent on how the CPU vendor does that. So we worked with each of the partners here to figure out the best way to do that integration. But the concept is quite simple, which is the closer it is to kind of the core processing unit and the more it's packaged together, the smaller the attack surface, the smaller the places that physical attacks can be directed to. And again, that's going to be very CPU and architecture dependent because we made this work across the full of the ecosystem. And so, but in essence, it is very complicated. Luckily, we have amazing partners who really, have a lot of innovations to offer in the silicon space. And our major goal as a Windows team is to make sure that we can use that security processor for awesome features like hello, data protection, etc., and make sure it's highly reliable and easy to update. So I'm going to switch back to getting to know our panel a bit. Kirsten, do you want to talk a little bit about what you work on? And again, same question your way. What's your favorite Win 11 feature?
Thanks for the question, David. Yeah, so I'm a product manager on the data protection team for Windows platform security. So we are looking at a lot of things for Windows 11. We're looking at things from protecting data on Windows from the firmware and physical attacks, which of course with hybrid work, that is a much higher concern for everyone everywhere. And so we're looking at performant encryption. That's, kind of a long-term strategy, as well as, of course, all the buzz about personal data encryption, the newest feature for Windows 11, which I'll have to say that's my favorite because it's a perfect example of balancing security with productivity. So you get increased security and, it's tied to your Windows Hello credentials, which makes it more secure and enables you to just seamlessly use your device and your applications without any change to your workflow. So PDE is so cool because it's transparent file level encryption on your data and it's protected under lock, which Bitlocker is an amazing tool and we want it to be used in concert with PDE, personal data encryption. But these together will make the data on your physical laptop more secure. So as you're traveling, as you're working wherever you are around the world, you can be confident that your data is protected, especially as there's more and more data that's being produced that could be sensitive. It's very high priority for us and for customers. So that has to be my favorite feature, although I would have to tie it with Pluton. Pluton is really cool long-term. It's going to be something that we can keep updating. So being able to prevent different firmware attacks over time, as attackers evolve, we need to evolve with them. So it's probably a tie between those two for my favorite products.
That's awesome. Thanks for that. Samreen, something Kirsten said brought me to you, which is we need to make crypto more performant. Can you talk a little bit about our strategies for doing that, especially as quantum attacks start to become, a reality of something we need to be concerned about? How do we, as someone who drives the quality and improvements around the crypto stack, how do we get more performance so Kirsten can use it for cool data protection features? And can you talk a little bit about the strategy and what you do day to day there?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as everyone is probably pretty familiar, crypto operations are very computationally high and take a lot of computing power. And so one area that we're starting to take a look at is how we can offload those high performant crypto operations to different hardware that can help accelerate the overall performance of cryptographic algorithms. And that's, one big area that we're starting to take a look at. And in order to understand that better, taking a look at how various cryptographic operations perform in different scenarios and running through kind of all that analysis and seeing what types of benefits we can get by offloading those crypto operations, I would say is probably the most crucial area that we're taking a look at right now. I think, just building off of what Kirsten said earlier, just understanding kind of how we can bring that to our customers faster and get ahead of it as we're planning almost 2 to 3 years in advance for what hardware we're going to be bringing out next.
Very cool. Glad you're driving that work. We definitely need more performant crypto. So here's an interesting one that I think Jordan would best be able to answer. Given the recent issues with driver signing that we've seen, I'm concerned that traditional attestation for binaries may not be adequate. Can you speak about how distribution fits into your code integrity plans? I think this is a great time to maybe talk about our driver reporting portal. Maybe Jordan, you can give an overview of that.
Yeah, it's a really good question, really good call out. So I do want to say the landscape of kind of what we trust in the kernel is definitely one of the main selling points for Windows. Like, we are such an open and diverse platform. We have no intentions of kind of limiting who can develop drivers for Windows, who can develop software. But that is sometimes at odds with security of the platform. So like Dave said, we're always continuing to invest in security features for remediation, for detection, in the context of both user mode and kernel mode. So recently we built up a reporting portal for drivers with suspected security vulnerabilities. So I will share the link afterwards, but if you just in your favorite search engine, just Microsoft Driver Reporting Center. So that gets submissions that get made in that portal go directly to our vulnerable driver blocklisting program, and then we'll get rerouted if they're malicious or malware samples. But ultimately, we continue to monitor everything that goes on in the driver space. We are evaluating a new feature shortly that will help kind of, again, limit the scope of natively kind of what Windows trusts in the kernel, but also while keeping compatibility and performance at the forefront. A really good question.
I'll jump in there. I mean, the best way to do this, in my opinion, the way I do it is I use an allow list. So I use our awesome tool set like Jordan's WDAC Wizard to actually scan the drivers I need and run an audit mode for a few days when I set up a new machine. That's going to tell me, hey, these are the drivers your machine actually needs to run. And then I lock it down to just that. And I don't have to worry about rando driver X having issues. I only have to worry about a much smaller subset of drivers that my machine actually needs to run. And if I get a new driver, I can drop it in a directory. I can run a scan on that. That gives me a rule. Again, WDAC Wizard, merge the rule in, done. So it's
really good point, Dave.
Yeah, it's not very difficult. And that's a heck of a lot easier than chasing around, whacking down drivers that you might be concerned about. The other thing I'll say on the crowdsourcing front that's pretty cool is there are groups like the Confidential Computing Consortium, which are looking at creating what we call ledgers or transparent viewpoints on the security and integrity of binaries. So the concept here is supply chain security is tough, right? So we want to try to be as transparent and broad as possible, inclusive of the opinions of key security components. So groups like the Confidential Computing Consortium are creating standards bodies and protocols to share this information. So not something we're going to see tomorrow, but I think it is promising. It's a great way to sort of, based on the question we got from the viewer, is creating sort of a crowdsourcing notion of that. So you could be a future where it's like, hey, I only want to let stuff that is known to be good on this ledger run. That is we're not there yet, but that is a concept that may work well in the future. Okay, got another cool question here. I think this one's going to Kirsten. Here's another. How does the new PDE feature work with OneDrive and SPO files? Is it only encrypted on the device, or will it mean that the files are encrypted on cloud storage as well?
Yeah, that's a great question as well. I believe it's just encrypted on the device, and I will need to double check that. And the reason is, the main attack vector that we're trying to protect against for PDE is a physical attack. So we're in development too. We have a long roadmap. We have a lot of features coming. So think about that as well.
Very cool. Okay, here's one for the group. So feel free to jump in. And this is a good one because I would love to get all the different perspectives here, which is career pathing. With a long career in desktop support and engineering, I'm looking to transition to cybersecurity. Any thoughts or suggestions on the type of security positions I should be looking at? And thanks for today's AMA. So we don't jump on each other. Anyone want to jump in there first on ways that this person and people in general might be able to get into fun cybersecurity jobs?
Yeah, I can.
Yes.
Sure, I can jump in. I think the great thing about cybersecurity is that it's such a new field and has a ton of growth. And it's also an area that if you're passionate about anything, there's so many resources for you to learn and get experience and get exposure to feel like you're kind of ready to look for positions, whether it's a security engineering or a security PM or really just anything in that area. I think if you have passion for the space, that's kind of the main thing that people look for in across the field. And I would say, just building on that passion and finding resources to, get a little bit up to speed with some of the technical areas in the space. And then targeting just any position that you're more curious about. And I think coming from desktop support and engineering, you have kind of a really clear understanding of some of the issues that customers deal with, and understanding kind of the security implications around that really kind of sets you up for success, I would say.
Anyone else on the panel want to jump in on their kind of path and advice there?
I can jump in. There's the cybersecurity field is very broad. It's both very broad and very deep. So the question really kind of becomes what's specifically within, and I think Simreen talked about this, what specifically within cybersecurity is the really interesting thing. I personally am a big fan of identity and authentication, shockingly. That's super important to me. And I've spent all of my career working on that. And that's only just a very slim portion of the entire cybersecurity field. So thinking about what are the things that are most important to you from a day-to-day perspective, what are the things that really interest you? There are some things in cybersecurity that really do not interest me. And so trying to find not necessarily what your passion is, but what's the thing that sort of jumps out to you and says, oh, that's really interesting.
Very cool. Kirsten, do you want to jump in here as well and talk about your personal perspective? Oh, we might have some connection issues.
If you can hear me.
We can hear you now.
Okay.
I think we're having some connection issues. We'll skip Kirsten for now. I'll try to get those packets flowing again. But for now, let's switch to another question. As we're getting the next question in, Jordan, I mentioned WDAC Wizard, which is like my favorite tool on the planet.
Awesome.
Do you want to give us an overview of the WDAC Wizard project, why you built it, how you use it, where people can get code? That would be awesome.
Yes, absolutely. So to step back, the WDAC Wizard is a tool for configuring your WDAC or app control policies that I touched on earlier. The main goal for app control or WDAC is to take what natively would run on a traditional Windows client or server system and shrink it to an allow list that Dave mentioned, right? So apps that you trust, that you want running on your system. Really good tie-ins with the Defender Reputation Cloud. So some really cool features around WDAC. The WDAC Wizard tries to make policy creation, which had historically been a little challenging for customers who are reliant on kind of modifying the XML by hand or by using we do have PowerShell commandlets, but it's a GUI graphical interface to to see what, really see what the policies that you're creating. So I built that as part of my onboarding project into Microsoft. I really kind of ran with it. I loved kind of the space, gave me a break from sending emails and meetings to writing some code here and there. But the WDAC Wizard is completely open sourced. It is available at ak.ms/WDAC Wizard. It's packaged as an MSIX, which makes installation and updating so much easier for myself and our customers. But yeah, I would highly recommend the WDAC Wizard. It is definitely my favorite way to configure policies. We ship a few, I think 3 templates in box as part of the Wizard. So you can get started with WDAC app control in a matter of minutes. And then you can obviously rip things out of your policies, add rules in to configure, let's say, your line of business applications, other tools that you need running on your system. So it's really a great resource for people who are interested in app control.
Are you taking pull requests, Jordan?
Absolutely, I'm always taking feature requests.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I do monitor the feature requests and bugs. So if there are anything, please let me know or add them as a Git issue.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry, we keep talking over each other. No, I just wanted to jump in and say Microsoft has been committing quite a bit to getting involved in just open source software and making kind of all the cool, great things like Jordan has worked on and some of the other folks just across the company open source and available for you to take a look at. My team specifically within the cryptography space has also open source Syncrypt, which is essentially the library that we use kind of for all of our cryptographic operations. And that's a really cool way to just learn more about what our crypto stack looks like from the internals and just also take a look at, ways to make suggestions or look for enhancements or things that you would like to see in the future. So definitely check out, I think, all of the great open source tools that we have that are out there, because it's just a great way to learn more and get more information about kind of the technical details of the great software that we're building.
Yes, very cool. And it's fun just to go through the Syncrypt code and learn some crypto. That's a great way to start your career in cybersecurity, is to read Syncrypt. All right, here's a good one. I realize that passwordless is the future. I think it's the present, but okay, we'll go with the future. And a huge focus for the improved logon experiences Win 11. However, there are many enterprises and insurance providers that are requiring multi-factor auth, yes, thumbs up for that, during device sign-in, and it's a common compliance requirement. Can we also get an easy way to roll out multi-factor authentication in Windows Hello for Business? I mean, username, password, and push-based approval with number matching. So before I get Steve and some other folks who are really familiar with this, the thing I want to say is, if you have Windows 11 and you meet the device requirements, you have multi-factor authentication. The TPM is the same thing as, say, a security key, like a FIDO2 security key from some vendors you might know, and it's built right into your device. So you can, from a Windows 11 machine, use Windows Hello, enroll in Windows Hello for Business, and you have multi-factor authentication without plugging in a phone, doing any kind of push requests, which have challenges from a deployment perspective. You have it there. Now, you might have other reasons you want to do it on a device, and that's great, and we support that. Steve can tell you a little bit more about that because he really is deep in this. So, Steve, do you want to talk a little bit about how you can do MFA with Windows Logon from a device?
Yeah, sure. So there is actually already a feature that exists. It came out in one of the earlier versions of Windows 10 called Multifactor Unlock. And it allows you to create a policy that dictates what forms of MFA do you require, as well as what multiple forms of MFA do you require. So do you require a facial biomatch plus thumbprint, or that plus PIN, or something like that? So that already exists today. You can deploy that on any Windows 10 device or Windows 11. But the question, I think, really boils down to, there's a lot of people that prefer the modality where, you get your prompt on your phone to unlock your device, and it turns out that there is a very high percentage of scenarios where that simply doesn't work. You're on a desert island and you're trying to log into your machine, or you're in an environment like a data center where you don't have cell coverage. You're in a secure facility where they've taken your phone away. Things like that, or you're on an airplane. It becomes, I know it's weird. Nobody, people haven't been flying, but it's important to understand that if there's a scenario that you're completely locked out of and you can't get into your machine, your users will have a very bad time getting their work done. So this is one of the important reasons why we have invested a lot of time and energy into Windows Hello as well as FIDO as one of our primary authentication and MFA solutions, because it provides offline access as well as a very strong root of authority for logging into your machine, as well as all of your online services.
Very cool. All right. Here's a question, I think, for me. How do we mitigate some of the serious bypasses demonstrated by David at the hybrid work event the other day? I get Pluton fixes this, but enterprises might not have Pluton and would like to make sure they're secure. Great news there. The vast majority of everything I showed was an attack with the control. So you can watch back at the video. I think that gives you some practical advice. Specifically, I think this person is talking about the Bitlocker hardening and how to protect yourself from Bitlocker. Again, great news. We have a Bitlocker countermeasures article, which we've had for a few years now, up on TechNet, that describes how you can set very simply at a policy control level things like what we call Bitlocker plus PIN, which is an authentication layer as soon as you start your device. And that will completely stop things like someone without the PIN or authentication ability to actually do any of the sniffing, etc. Also, anyone using a embedded firmware TPM from a manufacturer doesn't have this issue in the way I showed it there. So plenty of ways to mitigate that quite simply with just policy. So nothing to worry about there. Pluton and other similar embedded security processors just make that one step easier, but you're completely safe if you follow the Bitlocker guidelines. And let's also remember that's a very exotic attack. I wanted to show you how far you have to go for Windows 11. So consult your threat model, think about your risk analysis. If you'd like to set that, there are plenty of ways to do that, and the link is actually in the video. So let's see what other questions we have. Let's see. Here's one, I think, for Jordan. The new driver block list, is it the same list that we're currently using to generate rules? I think that person means the recommended block list. I'd love not having to maintain it and just turn on the security setting instead.
Yeah, great question. I should have called that out. It is the exact same list. So that driver block list, we do open source, so that for whatever reason, if enterprise or customer doesn't want to turn on the list, they can still add it to their existing app control policies. So yeah, it's the same list. That is also shipped in the Wizard. So with the click of a button, all those rules get added to your existing app control policy. Absolutely.
Very cool. All right, Kirsten's back now. Let's welcome her back. Looks like the connection issues are resolved. So Kirsten, I wanted to give you a chance to going back to the cybersecurity career advice. You were weighing in there when we dramatically lost you. Can you, love to get your advice there. Can you get us up to speed on what you think is the best way to move from a career in support towards cybersecurity, or other folks just looking to get into a similar career path?
Yeah, absolutely. I love the question too. And this is going to become more and more something that more people keep asking. I think the is no matter what industry you come from, it's going to be relevant for a future cybersecurity career because cybersecurity affects. I came from aerospace. That's a very safety and cybersecurity focused industry. This, so no matter which industry you're coming from, you can do it all in cybersecurity. So I think that's really exciting because you could have additional questions for certain areas, and you can absolutely follow and help your companies be secure along the way. And so, anything from actual insights to engineering products, different opportunities. So I would encourage anyone to absolutely take a look. There's so much learning out there that you can do, so much in the news that you can follow as well. Just where your passion takes you.
Very cool. Thank you for the advice. And I want to send a extra special thanks to my incredible panel here today. So thank you for joining us on the Tech Community Live. This was our Win 11 Security Ask Me Anything. We hope we were able to answer all of your questions, and we'll continue doing so in the chat for the remainder of the hour. So next up, we have the Windows Management Crew with my buddy Steve Dispenza, who can answer management and security questions. They announced a really cool feature, privilege access management. So I might jump in and ask a few questions there because I'm getting ready to use that. So thanks everyone for joining us. And like I said, we'll continue to take some questions in the chat where we can. But a big thank you to the amazing crew here for jumping on with us this morning and answering all kinds of questions on the fly. I even learned stuff. It was awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.